Our next speaker is Sandison, Director of the Washington State Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Laura. So I want to focus my introductory remarks on agricultural water supply, which if you know me, that's probably no surprise. But I think we expect to see some pretty profound effects on our agricultural water supplies from climate change, and you know, it's something we've actually been working on for a number of years now in Washington to try to deal with that issue. So with the exception of wheat, other grains, and some pulse crops, most of the state's agricultural production is irrigated. The majority of crop productions in eastern Washington, which is, of course, the place where water is relatively scarce, you know, you see widespread development of agriculture, 670,000-acre Columbia Basin project, and the large agricultural areas in the Yakima Basin and other East Slope Cascade tributaries. So over the past decades, I indicated there's been a number of state-initiated efforts led by the Department of Ecology to plan for additional water supply in the eastern part of the state. That's led to efforts like the Yakima Integrated Water Resource Management Plan, the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Project. And those projects were done in conjunction with Bureau of Reclamation, so we had federal modelers working with us using their, like in the case of the Yakima, the Riverware model, to run scenarios on what climate change effects might be on water supplies east of mountains or within the greater Columbia Basin. And I want to provide this, I put this up here mainly for purposes of comparison because I'm going to show you Yakima, a tributary basin, next, and you'll see a profound difference. But if you can see the lines there, this is Columbia River flows. The black line is the historic record flows. The middle case sort of climate change scenario is presented in green. A less warming and wetter scenario is in red, and a more warming and drier scenario is in blue. And as you see with the green and the red, you see some significant increases in winter and spring flows, but by June sort of lines pretty well with current, I shouldn't say current, but historic flows. In the case of the more warming and drier, you see a little less water in May and June, but other than that, conforms pretty well to historic flows. Now, Paul, it's not. Oh, could be a way. So try it. There we go. 18th century stuff. Okay, so again, the comparison here, this is Yakima Basin, and looking at one of the climate change scenarios that we modeled in that basin. The blue represents the historic record. As you see, the peak flows occur in May, June time frame, typically, sometimes May, June, July. But under the climate change scenario that we modeled, which is shown in red, it pushed the peak way out into the winter months, into January through April. And it's very similar to what we saw in 2015. And it represents what we'd expect for other snowpack-dependent basins on the east slopes of the Cascades. So it's, see if this works this time. No, it's bad. There we go. There. It's important to note that while total precipitation is not expected to change very much, I mean, you might see a 2.5% decrease to as much as a 13 or 14% increase. It isn't the total amount that is of concern. It is it's the distribution within the year. And what we see is you could see increases in winter flows as much as 50 to 70%. This is 3 different scenarios that we looked at, but again, the range would be 30 to 70% increase in winter flows, but we see decreases in summer flows of again 30 to 70%, and so that of course corresponds with the growing season. So we're seeing projections of flows being greatly diminished during the peak of the growing season. So you couple the dramatic change in flow regime with the anticipated longer growing season and higher temperatures, and it means that a lot more water will likely be needed to grow permanent and semi-permanent crops. And in a basin like Yakima, and again, in this case, the red represents permanent crops, the purple represents semi-permanent crops such as Timothy hay, mint, and other crops, and green is the annual production. So there's not a whole lot of green. The yellow is dryland. But as you look at that, again, if you're growing permanent or semi-permanent crops, it's going to mean a lot more water is going to be needed to meet your needs. If you're growing annual crops, you could benefit because the growing season will shift to the left with the hydrograph, and so you have an earlier start to the growing season if it's a single crop pattern. But if you're double cropping, you still have the problem that the latter part of the growing season is going to be significantly water challenged. So as you can see, in terms of looking ahead and trying to plan for this for our irrigated agriculture, it's a pretty daunting task. And I would mention the farm gate value of crops grown in Washington is about a total of $11 billion, and we export every year about $7.8 billion in food and agricultural products. 1.5 billion of that 7.8 is the 2 crops, apples and potatoes, which are heavily dependent on irrigated agriculture. So, a big issue for us. It's not the only issue we're concerned about in climate change, but it is of great concern. So thank you very much for having me today. Appreciate it.